Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining my channel once again. This is Jake Kerr. I'm going to be talking to you about my process of writing Tommy Black and the Cup of All Seeing, which is the third book of my Tommy Black series, written for middle grade and young adult readers, but adults would enjoy it too, I'm sure. And it's a fantasy series set in World War II. I'm going to write the series live right here on Twitch and do it in small sessions of probably 1,000 to 1,500 words and take about an hour each time. And if you haven't read book one or book two, it's not necessary to really enjoy this, although you'll miss some of the backstory. The book one, Tommy Black and the Code of Invincibility, and book two, Tommy Black and book one, Tommy Black and the Staff of Light, and book two, Tommy Black and the Code of Invincibility. Are available pretty much anywhere if you wanted to pick those up. But this is really twofold. It's for fans of the series who really want to see how book three unfolds through the creative process of the writer. And it's also for people who are curious about the writing process itself, because if you've seen the very first episode, I go into quite a bit of detail of my thought processes I'm writing. Hopefully it's entertaining, hopefully it's educational, and hopefully, like I said, at the end of the day, you have fun. A little bit of a warning, there's going to be a ton of spoilers if you're a Tommy Black fan. We're going to talk about where the plot's going. We're going to talk about what my thoughts are in terms of the scene, where it's going within that section of the book, and that's going to demand that we look a little bit into the future in terms of what's happening. But again, this is about writing and writing this particular book. So I'm going to go in little bit of pieces, and you hopefully will kind of get caught up for where we're going. In the future, what I'm going to do is really kind of stop giving this little lecture at the beginning, and I'll start with a I'll start with a kind of just a summary of what happened in the previous in the previous episode, so you have an idea of where I'm going. All right, so let's continue and get to the writing. Where I left off yesterday was Tommy and his magician friend Naomi. In the end of book two, had just defeated the Nazis. They have the Code of Invincibility, and I talked about the opening scene as them going back to their hotel and kind of figuring out what the code is and what its power is, and that's where we left. One of the things that you can note here that's hopefully interesting to you is I really didn't go back and kind of write while I wasn't streaming. I left it literally exactly where I left off, mid dialogue. One of the things to note about writers is that every writer has their own process. Some people will finish a scene or finish a chapter. That goal of finishing is what pushes them to get those last few words in. Other people will really force themselves to stop mid-scene so that when they start up next time, it kind of builds the momentum. They need to kind of finish what they started, and it starts them off in a path. I'm kind of neither. I just kind of like writing. So for me, if I stop in the middle like I did here, it's going to be very easy for me to pick up. If I stopped at the end of the chapter, what I would really do is talk to you about what I plan for the next chapter, the next scene before we talk. But right now, let's kind of continue on. If you remember where I left it, Naomi had just cast a detonation at Tommy Black's Tommy, and it fizzled when it hit the coat, and we talked about that in the last episode, what it does, and it kind of went away. My thought was, okay, what does this mean? Naomi was trying to kind of picture a way to describe it. Was it a dam that made the water go around it, or did it just kind of disperse? And the idea of dispersing is what I'm trying to get to here. So she's kind of trying to explain that to Tommy. She's a master magician, probably the most knowledgeable magician in history. She's read almost every book there is about magic going back hundreds of years. She's trying to explain to Tommy that she cast the spell, and through her knowledge, she knows that it didn't just kind of impact the coat and kind of deflect. It was absorbed. It wasn't absorbed. It was kind of like the energy was dispersed. So that's what we're going to try to do, is kind of explain that to Tommy here, and that's going to lead into the next part of the conversation, which is, okay, we know what it does to magic. We know that your punch didn't affect it. Let's get some more power, and that's when they bring Iggy, who's an Ifrit, a magical creature with an enormous power, back into the scene, and that gets all three of our characters back in. So. The energy I channeled into the detonation was rechanneled back into the earth. It's like the coat is reversing. Now, Tommy, in the early part of this scene from yesterday, he was concerned that by casting that spell at him, it would hurt the building or people who are around them. And now that he's heard what Naomi has said, he's going to basically say, oh, so I don't have anything to worry about. All right, this is a very important point. One of the things we're going to see coming up, and this is a massive spoiler, is that Tommy's going to be heading toward the middle of Germany to retrieve the cup. He can't be hurt. He's got this enormous power of the staff. He basically feels indestructible and almighty. The Germans and others that we'll get to are going to be hurling things at him, bombs, magic, everything they can to stop him, and nothing can stop him. But he asks a question here where he says, well, nothing around me is going to get hurt. And Naomi's going to just say, well, nothing that can't be absorbed or dispersed will get you hurt. Now, it's just a passing line here. It's going to have a huge impact later, because as the Germans start attacking Tommy, the people around him do get hurt. And that's a real key plot point as we move into the second part of the book. But we kind of want to leave a little bit of foreshadowing here to let the reader know when they go back and reread it, if they do, or at least understand that although Tom is just kind of saying, hey, it's not going to affect anything, it really does. I don't want to use disperse multiple times, so but I haven't really used it here, so let's use it here. All right, now he makes that important point. Tommy, he's already looking like, hey, so anything aimed at me isn't going to hurt me, and he's thinking like, okay, we know magic is going to do it, but let's up the things. So he's going to recommend going to get Iggy, who's going to punch him with enormous power. But before we do that, Naomi's going to say, let me try one more, and she's going to launch at him one of the most powerful spells she knows. All right, so Tommy's getting excited, right? So he knows that the magic's not going to hurt him. Now he wants to see if this huge, incredibly powerful magical creature with physical force can hurt him. So he's just kind of going off into the world of I'm invincible. So we're kind of building toward that. This isn't really just him playing around. We're building up to the concept of Tommy feeling like he's invincible, because Tommy feeling invincible is really the next stage of where the story goes. And we're going to do some interior thinking here. This is written in first person, so it's very easy. He thinks back to, what can I do here that will illustrate just how powerful I am. So there's a little bit of arrogance here as well. All right. Tommy's saying to himself that it's almost unbelievable, but he really does believe it. He wants to do it. However, Naomi, who is also her own character, obviously, and also has her own set of arrogance and confidence in herself, wants to try one more thing. All right, here's another fun part about writing. All right, in the past, Naomi has cast this incredibly powerful spell that no one else has been able to cast for centuries. I can't remember what it is, and I can't even remember if it's black. I'm pretty sure that the magic is black. So what I'm going to put here is the XXX of XXX, which is the name of the spell. And upon revision, I'll come back and put the right name in there and the right description. The important thing for me here, while I'm writing the first draft, is to move forward with the idea of what she's doing. I know what she's doing, I just haven't described it correctly. I can come back and fix that later. All right, I can't remember what the name of the sea was where it sunk the ship, so let's do that on revision as well. That was a spell that had sunk ships. I could go two ways here when you're a writer. If you want to refer to something specific, like the sea, the North Sea, or the Atlantic Ocean, you could just stop, go back, figure out where they were before, and insert it here. Or if it's really not that important to have that reference point and you can't remember and you want to move forward and not worry about it, you can just use some generic marker that the reader will understand. We do know that there was only one instance where she sunk a ship with a spell. We know where that was and what the circumstances are, so it's not really important for me to have the location. So I'm just going to say that was a spell that had sunk a German ship, and I'll just leave it at that. I may come back and revise and give it a little bit more detail to add some feeling to it, but I'm going to stop with that. It sounded dangerous to cast in a hotel room. All right, here's where it gets interesting. Naomi is Naomi, and she's not going to reply. All right, here's where an adverb I think is necessary. I want to describe her smile because she's got a smile. It's a knowing smile. It's a mischievous smile. It's something that indicates that she knows he knows. She doesn't care. She's not going to answer the question. She's going to do it anyway. So she's smiling out of her own sense of mischievousness, and describing that smile is really what I want to do here. If I was a little bit more of a literary author for this series and I thought it was important, I would go into a fairly long simile. Maybe I would use a metaphor to describe the smile that would refer to her feelings inside. But it's really not that important here. All I want to get across is the feeling that she knows what she's doing and she doesn't really care. So I could also say she smiled. That lets the reader kind of fill in the blanks in terms of why she's smiling. The trouble is that smiling is one of those kind of physical things that you write about a lot when you're writing a novel. It's almost a universal kind of reaction. When you're happy, when you're in love, when you see something that delights you, you smile. So it's used a lot. So just saying she smiled, you almost want to take the edge off of saying she smiled. I know it sounds odd. A lot of writers out there are like, hey, let the verb convey the action. But when it's the same verb that you're using many times in a book, you want to kind of give it a little bit of you take the specificity off of it, I guess, or add specificity to it, I guess is what I'm saying. All right, let's use. Instead of using a simile or metaphor, we'll use what I call kind of like a character reference. She's going to smile in a way that Tommy's seen before, but that he means that she's up to no good. So. What do the rest of us do? We just sit back and hope nothing goes wrong. All right, so you see what I did there? Again, I'm going to go into a little bit of details. I hope this doesn't bore you. I said before she smiled, and I wanted to use an adverb. What I did was didn't want to use an adverb. I didn't want to use just the verb. So I described the smile in the light of her character, reminding the reader through Tommy's thinking what she had done in the past. So again, it kind of gives her character some a little bit more depth. All right, again, I'm going into detail. All she did was smile. And now she's going to cast the spell. And again, Naomi isn't one for warnings when she feels like things are going to go well. Without... I don't like this particularly how I'm phrasing it, but the idea is there. It's another example of something you come back to on revision and you fix. He feels energy. It's an energy that has to be relevant to 1940, in the 1940s. Static energy feels good. Kind of cliched, but we'll leave it at that. If I wanted to torture you all, I'd do the same thing I did with Smile and go through and kind of think through how I want to word it, but I'll do that on revision. All right, this reads horrible, but the idea is there. Again, I may fix this right now, but I want to get the idea across. The energy of the detonation came in from the previous part of the scene, and it just dispersed. Now we have a much more powerful spell. What we want to do is get the idea that it comes in, and more power is getting dispersed, but it's still getting dispersed. Again, I'm putting a lot of thought into this because the idea of how it works is going to be important later. It's all part of world building. You show one thing, you scale it up, you show another, and then the reader understands that this is the kind of science of the magic that's behind it. So she sent one spell, this new super powerful spell that he was actually worried it would level the building, if not the block. Does the same exact thing, but it's just bigger. So I'll come back and revision, clean this up. I use the kind of simile here of people being stuffed in a room and you having a difficult time breathing, and then as everybody leaves the room, it's easier to feel, and that's the feeling of when this thing was coming to him and then went away. It's not a good simile, but the vibe is there. It's just not a good kind of connection. So I'll fix that on revision, but you kind of get the idea of what I'm going for. All right, Naomi's excited. She just discovered that it's the same exact thing. Like I said, as readers are scaling up and understanding the science of the magic, Naomi, a master magician, she had a hypothesis that she was sure was going to be correct because she put everybody's life at risk, and it turned out to be true. So what does she do? She's could scream out in delight, but that's not Naomi's style. She's more the type that will kind of like nod her head with kind of like, yeah, I did it. All right, Tommy was just faced with a spell that would destroy a ship, so he's going to make a snarky comment. Naomi's going to turn it around and give some crap back to Tommy. And again, now we're into a banter, so we don't do a whole lot of descriptions, back and forth dialogue. Let's not get specific here. All right, we have a little bit of a banter here. It could go on longer, but I think I made the point. Tommy's trying to be a little bit more responsible. Naomi's excited that everything worked the way she thought. Tommy's like, hey, you shouldn't do that. And she's like, hey, I was positive. He's like, well, why do you did it? And she's like, it was fun. Perfectly in line with their characters. It propels the science of the magic so we now understand it. And now we can kind of move on to the next. Now, the next thing I want to do is bring Iggy back into the scene. Iggy is the Ifrit, the magical creature that has been kind of chaperoning them, or at least partnering with them toward the end of the second book. And he went off to kind of recharge in his room. Now they want to bring him back so we can get all three of them together to kind of discuss what they're going to do next. The reason they're going to bring him in, though, is they want, Tommy wants to see what his punch will do. So let's do that, and I think that will take us to the end here, possibly, of this writing session, but we could go into that some more. All right. Naomi says it's a great idea, and again, we're going to kind of delve into her character a little bit. She doesn't think it's a great idea because they're going to test the physical force. She thinks it's a great idea because she's all about magic. With a magical, she already threw an ashtray at Tommy and it did nothing. She punched him, it did nothing. She knows physical force isn't going to affect him, but Iggy is a magical creature, and she's interested in the magical creature's physical force if it's different than physical force. Tommy doesn't know that, and she doesn't share it with him, but as a writer, I think that in the back of my mind, why would she be enthusiastic about this? So she's going to pay attention for different reasons, even though their goal is the same. They want to see if Iggy, this powerful Ifrit, can hurt Tommy. Another great strategy here is Tommy's waiting. It's first person. Naomi went off to get Iggy. There's a gap in time there where nothing really happens, but it's not long. She's going to go to his room and just bring him over. Might take 2 minutes, 5 minutes at most. So we're going to use a little bit of interior dialogue to kind of fill the space. Interior dialogue that's going to kind of set up that next scene because Tommy's going to think about it. All right. For those who aren't familiar with Iggy, Iggy is a magical creature that was sent to kind of protect Tommy from the kind of world of magical creatures, the Ifrit, the Marids, and the Jinn. His motivations seem very positive. He's helped save them in multiple encounters. He's even hurt himself in an attempt to save Tommy at times. But the reality is we really don't know why. We've never really found out why he's there. We just know that he seems to be there to help Tommy for the reasons that, what he said was that Tommy is the one who is with the purest of heart to be able to take care of all of these artifacts, more so than Nazis or Princess Anastasia. So, makes sense. Everybody's like, okay, well, that makes sense. Let's move on. But, we really don't know. We have to take his word for it. Now, the interesting thing, and that leads me to the next comment, is that we learned that Jinn and Ifrit cannot tell a lie to humans. It's one of the reasons that they give. Let me see here. How's that? I had someone in the chat room say that the words are cut off. Let's see. Is that better? Let me take a look at this. the words are not supposed to be cut off. So this is the great thing about my first few tries at Twitch is getting it all right. All right, I moved the screen. If it's not, let me. Oh, I know where I can fix that. Let's see. I'm sorry for the delay here. I'm trying to fix things. Let me see. All right, how is that? That should be better. Hopefully that's better. Hold on. All right, take a look at that. I'm going to continue. If that looks better, let me know. If not, I'll fool with it some more. All right, so Iggy can't tell a lie. So Tommy is going to be asking him questions, and it's important because he, for those who aren't familiar, it's very humorous interacting with Iggy because he won't tell a lie. So when you ask him questions like, how do I look? He'll say, you look ugly or things like that, and it's part of his charm. So Tommy's going to ask him questions here. So and the responses are going to be part humorous, but really pointed. Here comes the humor. Yeah, there you go. So Tommy asks Iggy what would happen if he gets struck by him, and Iggy says, "Yeah, you're going to die horribly. I'm going to crush the side of your body, and you're going to fly into the wall and just basically put a hole in the wall." And Naomi goes, "Perfect." So, which is very typical. Tommy, being calm, interjects and explains what's going on. Okay, so Tommy is clearly, as he was thinking it over, he got a little nervous. And this is where it comes to bear in front of Naomi, and just wants to make sure that he doesn't die. Iggy's a very kind person, and is going to double check. He'll say, "Are you sure?" All right, one of the things I want to note on the writing side is you'll see a lot of this is just unattributed dialogue. When you're writing, you'll hear that a lot of people will say, you have to attribute the dialogue so you know who's speaking. That's absolutely true, but it's not so true when the personalities are very clear and the lines of dialogue are also clear. Sometimes the attribution just makes it slow down. The he said, she said, he whispered, he muttered. All of that stuff can slow down when we're really in a back and forth kind of discussion of what's going on. In this case, we have a good idea of who's speaking, not just a good idea, we have a perfect idea of who's speaking. Tommy's talking about what he wants. Iggy's talking about, he's concerned about the damage, and Naomi's in the back just kind of saying, like, get on with it, I want to see this happen. So we don't have to do a whole lot of attribution here. All right, here's where attribution is kind of interesting. Iggy answers okay, and then he swings and hits, and I say without another word, Iggy swung back. I think it's pretty clear that's Iggy that said that, but because I say without another word, I think there's a little bit of confusion there that maybe he wasn't the one who said okay. And again, this is a really good example of where you might want to add an adverb. You know, he said, it doesn't really give you an indication of where his personality is. Iggy is very matter of fact, so we can leave it like that. But maybe, you know, is he concerned or is he just moving ahead? Let's just go with his true personality, which is, yeah, you know what? We don't need an adverb here. Iggy's character by now is very clear. Iggy said, and by the way, we don't have a whole lot of attribution above that, so it's really not going to slow anything down, like I mentioned before. All we did was clarify that it was Iggy. All right. He swung, didn't do anything. Now it's time to hear from Naomi. As we know, she's kind of amusing and full of energy, so her comment would be more along the lines of, you know, let's just do it. Do it again. Hit him harder. Thought. Tense is important. All right, this is actually really interesting. Earlier on, I noted about how, you know, Naomi wants Iggy to do it because this is an experiment for her, and it's the natural end of the experiment. I let that bleed into my first person here because Tommy's thinking exactly what I had thought before. But Tommy may not know that, so I kind of have an option here. It's like, does Tommy start to think like Naomi because he knows her as well? And do I just leave this the way it is, or do I just kind of leave Naomi's thoughts to herself and just have, you know, Tommy acknowledge that, you know, she doesn't really want to see him hurt. She's just excited. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to have Tommy realize finally that this is not anything more than Naomi's one big science experiment for her about magic. It's not her joking around. It's not her having fun. She didn't cast that huge spell at him just to be a jerk and to have fun, even though she said it was for fun. In his heart, he knows it's all because she is a magician, a mighty magician, and she was learning. So let's bring it all together here and leave it like this. Culmination's a little too strong. Let's see how all of her assumptions. Tommy's going to think of them as assumptions. Naomi's going to think of them as hypotheses that she was sure about. And Tommy will even note that. almost tossed an adverb in there. Would have been okay putting simply there, but unnecessary. All right. I think he looked at me. I like this. You know, part of being part of a team is that you can speak without speaking. That's sometimes difficult to do when you're writing because you have to do so much of like, his eyes looked at me knowingly and things like that. If you can kind of get away with it by just saying he looked at him and I did an action like nodded or shook my head, it's really kind of powerful. So let's do that. Iggy looked at me and I nodded. And then he punches him again. So Naomi, again, we've already talked about how she's investigating. You know, what did it feel like? And again, Iggy's a freak and can't tell a lie. A little bit of coffee for me. I'll probably come back and revise this a little bit. I want it to be very matter of fact because that's how Iggy speaks. Did this, 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 and this. But I wanted to, in my first draft here, get a kind of an idea of what he's saying. So let's continue from here. All right. So what do we go here? We're at a kind of transitional point. And I don't have a full hour tonight, so I'm going to end this pretty quick, end this soon. We brought all three of them together. The next part of the scene is them saying, okay, we understand the coat. You can't be damaged. We all knew that, but now they've kind of investigated it, and the reader has a very firm idea based on Naomi's experimentation what the coat can do. Now the idea is, what are they going to do next? All three of them are in the room, and that's obviously the next question that they need to ask. What do we do next? I think I'm going to leave that for the next writing session. What I'm going to kind of leave with you here is that I'm at 1,900 words, so two thoughts. And again, I want to be very inspirational for those writers out there who might be viewing this. I'm walking through, in my mind with you, everything that I'm writing. It's slow. I'm kind of going a bit fits and starts. And in about 45 minutes, I got 937 words done. So that's 1,000 words in about 45 minutes. You can do it. You absolutely can do it. You just sit down and you work your way through. You think of the things, and you're like, oh my gosh, what a slog. I'm thinking through all these options. What can I do? And before you know it, at the end of the hour, you're 1,000 words in. That's a pace that I think you can do, and I think that's a pace that I think that just thinking through it yourself, you can hold up. Stephen King says to aim for 2,000 words a day. That would be 2 writing sessions of an hour each that you can kind of get to that. Once you get going, you don't have to have this kind of internal dialogue. You can just kind of think it through your head and go faster, and you'll get more words down. The other thing I wanted to point out here is this is 2,000 words in. Chapters are generally in a novel can be any length, from 2,000 words or shorter, all the a few hundred words actually, all the way up to, or one word, all the way up to like 10,000 words. For me, I like to have generally small to medium-sized chapters for Tommy Black, just because the scene changes kind of fit naturally on a chapter-by-chapter level. It's not really that important because all of the books are told from Tommy's point of view, so I don't have to flip point of views and kind of move them around or anything like that. It's all kind of sequential. That makes it easier as well. But in this case, what I want to kind of let you know is here's what we've done in 2,000 words. We've taken them from their victory to get the coat. We've illustrated that we've reintroduced to the readers the personality of Naomi, a little bit of her magic knowledge, a little bit of Tommy's uncertainty. We've introduced Iggy's kind of matter-of-factness and his enormous power, and we've kind of introduced the science of the code. We've done all of that, kind of setting up book 3 in 2,000 words. I'm not saying that's good. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying that what I've aimed to do here is to make every word count. And as I mentioned in the previous episode, when they were in the building at the end of book 2, I didn't want to pick up where they were in the building at the end of book 2. I wanted to go fast forward to where it really mattered. So that's basically it. It's 9:48 here in Central Time. It's 10:48 Eastern Time. We got almost 1,000 words written. I'll be back here tomorrow night at the same time. You can look at the channel and make leave any comments you like. You'll see the schedule there as well. And I hope you're having fun. Thanks again, and I'll see you tomorrow.